I'm Chris Terranova, and this is the Generational Exchange. 4 generations, one conversation. The business world is a tapestry woven from different threads. The experience of seasoned veterans, the tech savvy energy of the younger generation, and everything in between. In this podcast, we'll unravel those threads, exploring the unique perspectives from panelists in their 30s, 40s, 50s, and 60s on today's business challenges. By bringing together these unique voices, we hope to spark new ideas, bridge the generation gap, and equip listeners with a well rounded approach to navigating the ever evolving business landscape. All right, we have the panel as always. I'm so excited. The four of us get together every week. This is a great group. I'm going to start with the lovely and talented Rhett Suchu representing our 30s.
Hello,
Good evening,
sir.
Rhett. Hello, sir. Good to see you.
Good to see you.
And as always, we have Jeremy Davidson, who represents the 40s. Greetings, my friend.
Currently on vacation. I'm going to call this my vacation week. So,
attaboy. Don't read ahead. Don't read ahead. And then we also have the lovely and talented Mark Russell representing our 60s, the 60s, I guess not our 60s, the 60s. Good evening, Mark.
Or my 60s.
Or your 60s.
And,
yes.
and I remember when Blackberries were considered cutting technology. So,
I'm so sorry. And then I'm Chris Terranova, and I'm representing the 50s. So we've got the panel here. We're going to get into it. Today's topic is going to be preparing for a new role and building out your 30, 60, and 90-day plan. I'm really excited about this one. I think a lot of people are going to get benefit from this. So if you're starting a new role or you're brand new to a role, this is the episode for you. We provide you with some tried and true tips for before you start and what to do once you are already in the role. Plus, our dear friend Jeremy Davidson has some exciting news, and he's going to provide his experience as he's preparing to start on a new adventure himself. This is going to be an awesome episode. I am very excited. So let's start the exchange.
Yeah, no, it's exciting. Actually, before we get into the big list, we acknowledge the elephant in the room, starting a new role. It's super cool, right? You go through that period of job searching, whether you're currently employed or laid off, looking for a new opportunity. It's nerve-wracking, it's stressful, it's challenging, and then you get the good news. Hey, I got a new role. It's exciting, it's awesome, it's wonderful, but it's scary too, right? Yeah, often cited as one of the top 3 most stressful activities somebody can encumber. You got a new business to learn, new leaders to impress,
right?
New team members to build trust with, new goals to hit. And probably a whole slew of new systems that you've got to learn, right? Or at least learn how the new business is using those systems that you might have previously been familiar with. But on day one, you got to put your game face on. You know what you're doing. The company hired you. They got confidence in you. The team is going to love you. At least, that's what I'm going to tell myself when I'm looking in the mirror at 6 o'clock in the morning. I start.
Yep.
But it's kind of a mixed bag of emotions, right? You're stressed, you're searching, you're trying to find that perfect opportunity. That perfect opportunity comes in. You love the company, you love the leadership, and you're getting ready to start. And oh boy, it starts to sink in, right? We talked about imposter syndrome, we talked about mentoring, we talked about how to score that next promotion. A new role is kind of like getting that next promotion. We'll tie them all together here in the podcast today. So, I don't know, what do you guys take on that? Do you remember the last new opportunity that you started? Did you have some of those pre-staged jitters?
Oh my gosh, of course. I think that's normal and natural, right? So to start off with that, I think that's totally appropriate. You can't let it, kind of disable you, but you've got to kind of acknowledge, because before this, you were in a role for a couple of years, and before that, you were in a role for 4 or 5 years. You build a cadence and a culture, and now you're stepping into a brand new role, and you're the new kid on the block. You don't know the cadence, you don't know the culture, right? So it's also a time to adapt and learn. And I'm thrilled for you, of course. We all are. I think this is going to be a great adventure. I think wherever you go, you're going to knock it out of the park. But even with all your skills and your talents and your degrees and your certifications and everything, I think it's really kind of wonderful that you're being vulnerable and acknowledging that, you've got some pre-start jitters, and I think that's okay. And I think we're going to talk through some things for, the audience to hear about, certainly what you're doing, but some things that you can do to kind of help mitigate that, and then how to get yourself into that cadence. So I think this is just a great topic. I can't wait to hear your thoughts on it. Red or Mark?
Yeah, Jeremy, I was gonna say, when it comes to this topic, what I try to do is go back to my control the controllable aspect, right, and look at the and try to focus on the exciting aspect of it, because I think you and I are both similar in that I love the getting to know people, the new processes, the okay, why do you do it this way? We have Mark's tried and true story about why you cut a ham in half and stick it in an oven a certain way, and how it's just been passed down generation to generation. But plug for the podcast there, by the way. That's a good one. Generations there. But for me, I can't necessarily always control the attitudes and perspectives I'm going to get back from my new team or the core group that I'm joining. So I tend to try and focus just on bringing as much positive energy and all of that I can to it. So I'd say when you ask, like, scared or excited, I'm definitely, there's always an air of how is this going to go, but I try to focus on what am I bringing to it, and bring that way more than me. Again, I always say if I can get on a call and laugh like Jeremy, I'm doing good.
Right.
So
100%.
Mark,
Mark, any thoughts?
The only thought is that it just shows the respect that you have for the position you're taking when you have those butterflies, leading up to day one, and even, obviously on day one. And like we also share sometimes in change management, you've left somewhere that you were extremely knowledgeable and comfortable, and now you're starting maybe at not zero, but certainly not where you left as a previous comfort level. So just continue doing great things.
No, that's cool. It's good to tackle that, and I kind of wanted to share that out there. Right, you get a lot of energy and enthusiasm, and for all those job seekers out there, we've been doing a lot of work, Chris and myself and Mark, with folks that are looking for jobs. Right, you're helping them with their resume, and the ultimate goal is landing that new gig. And all what that does is it starts the next chain of events. Right. All right, I'm switching my focus off of my career search to jumping into that new role. And Chris, I love the list for today. Didn't mean to preempt the list with the big elephant, but yeah, no, I think it's perfectly normal to be excited about it, be a little nervous about it. What's the new team going to be like? What's the new leadership going to be like? And up next, what can we do to control the controllable? Right, Rhett?
Yeah, exactly, my friend.
Yeah, we're going to have t-shirts made with that. All right. So I know we're going to get a lot of feedback from Jeremy as we go through it, because he's actually living this, but I'm excited. I think it's just a great topic in general, but to have someone who's actually going through it in real time, I mean, the timing couldn't have been better. So let's dive into it. Let's talk about, I've kind of tried to put together a list that has, the top 3 things. Keep in mind, there are lots of things that you can do, right? But, as we looked at this as a group, as we thought about it as a team, as we've lived this experience, these are the things that we thought were really the top 3 things at each stage that you could really get something out of and work on. So let's talk about before you start. I think a lot of people think about, there's the book, The First 90 Days, you're thinking about, okay, here's what I do when I start, but have you thought about what you're supposed to do before you start, right? So here's the top 3 things that we've come up with. The first one is research and familiarize yourself, right? Do some homework on the company. Learn about their mission, their values, their competitors, recent news, right? If there's an employee handbook, can you get your hands on it and take a look at that and start understanding what the company policies are? What are their benefits? What do they do and what they don't do? You can't assume any of those things, even if you talked about them during your interview. You can also try finding colleagues that work there on LinkedIn to get a sense of the team. There's lots you can do just to start to research and familiarize. The second thing you can do is look at the logistics and the preparation, right? Do you have a commute? If you have a commute, plan that in advance. Start becoming familiar with the route. As a lot of companies are starting to say we have to have hybrid, we have to go back to work, we've got these big offices. I don't know if I would have necessarily thought about planning out my route before starting, right?
Mm.
If you're working remotely, test your technology. I know Jeremy's going to speak to this, but he's getting a new laptop and a new phone and a new this, and we use Zoom, they might use Google, they might use meetings. You don't know, right? Test all that stuff. Don't start on the first day and start testing your equipment that morning, right? Make sure everything's working. Make sure your internet works. Make sure everything on your computer runs as necessary, right? Also, if you can find out what is the culture for dress, right? At our previous company where we all worked, it was very casual. I think we even had a meeting one time about the ability for everybody to wear sandals. You know, okay, but you might be going to a new place where it is shirt and tie, or it's something has to have a collar. I know we had calls where they didn't want people to wear anything that didn't at least have a logo. Find out those things. Again, not something I would have necessarily thought of right away. And then the third thing is make sure you're setting yourself up for success. Think about your goals for the new role. What do you want to achieve in those first few months? This will help you focus your learning and make a positive impression and kind of hit the ground running. And when we get to the 30, 60, 90-day plan, you're already starting to think about those things and getting them ready. I'm going to take a breath. Guys, what do you think? Feel free to comment and jump in there.
Well, I'll start with, there are some roles where, and I've had roles where I've hired people where I have asked for a 30, 60, 90-day plan. It's less about being precise, but it was more about understanding what their thought process is. And there are fundamentals that you can start, like working with your new manager and working with your HR business partner to collaborate with you on, okay, what should I be expecting, right? At the same time, show initiative, because if they're not as organized as you are, or you would hope they would be, which I'm assuming is, like in Jeremy's case, extremely detail oriented,
Right.
then you've got an equal responsibility to say, what can I do to help others after me have a much stronger onboarding process? Now, a lot of times in corporate cultures, you will get your PC, but you may not have your provisioned of all your applications until you actually have that first start date. Companies have to be very cautious on that. So again, just by dialoguing with the HR partner and your manager, you'll be able to set these expectations. But again, putting on that first impression is going to be important.
100% Red. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, Mark, I'm thinking back to our training team days, and with the second you said that, I was like, oh yeah, first day, who has what applications, what's set up, what's not. But anyway, no, and I agree with everything that you guys have said already. I guess the only points I would add to this maybe are, if you can at all, try to you've already done this if you've got the job, right? But you probably understand the market that you're going into, maybe what your company tends to focus on, or are they always pitching the culture and things like that, right? And so again, double check your tech and everything. I can't tell you how many times I'd say off-putting is the word, when you have someone who does a great interview and then maybe they struggle to get up and running, and it may be nothing to do with them, right? It could be their Wi-Fi fell out the one time that it ever has, but it can still be really tough. And so especially for those of you maybe taking a newer role or something, get a friend who has a laptop and test Google Meetings or something, right? You can do tests before to, hey, how's my bandwidth? How do I sound? Any echoes? Things like that you can do beforehand. Try to set up a rough schedule, I would say, for yourself. And again, be ready for a multitude of different reactions from your team members and the teams that you're joining, so that you can pivot effectively. So, yeah, that's what I'd add to that.
Right.
I like
Jeremy, I'm sure you've got thoughts. Go ahead, my friend.
Yeah, I liked Mark's tie in there. One of the things that I always look for in the onboarding process is what's working really well and where are there areas for improvement. So that may be a shout out for those folks that are jumping into leadership positions in particular, right? If you're in a hiring manager kind of role, um, likely the experience that you have onboarding is going to be very similar to the experience your employees may have as they're onboarding with the company, right? So what are some of the really positive things that went really well? And what are some maybe areas for improvement? It's kind of one of those once in a lifetime opportunities to go through the onboarding process as an employee, um, and look at it from that lens. And Lord knows we've all had those onboarding problems, right? Like, hey, we're lucky if the laptop shows up before the person starts, right?
Sure.
Yeah. Gone are the days where you get up and you put the shirt and tie on and you walk into an office and you kind of sit there in your cubicle looking around for 2 hours until somebody shows up to you know now somebody's sitting on the other end of a Zoom meeting going, what do I do? Right? Like you got to be prepared for what that onboarding looks like. And it's setting the tone for the company, right?
Right.
Something I really liked with this company, and it's a I did promise not to share out the company information prior to me starting. But they're a Series A startup, lots of high growth, right? That's perfect. That's what I was looking for. I love scaled processes. But they were doing something unique in the pre-onboarding that I might carry with me. They actually had they actually have all of their new employees take a industry certification prior to joining the company. Um, and it was a bit of a scramble. I run out and grab all the materials, and the company pays for it. Right in the rear, they pay for the study materials, the test, even give a dollar amount back to the employees, right? Because they're doing it on their own time. All really positive things. But what I really liked was through the course of studying for the assessment, all the practice tests, videos that I watched, and the actual assessment itself. I feel great walking in the door on day one in terms of what they actually do, and folks on my team so actually do on a day-to-day basis, the conversations they're having, the back and forth, the difference between different product lines. And I've never had that experience before in 20 some odd years of actually having kind of a pre-onboarding activity that really ramped you up. And I think the company likely uses it as a bit of a weeding out process too. I'm sure if I had gone through that and realized 3 days in, hey, this isn't going to be for me. This is not what I thought it was going to be. Um, hey, a heck of a lot better to know in advance. But have you guys had that experience before? What are your thoughts on kind of some pre-onboarding activities work from a company? And if they're willing to foot the bill for it, does that resonate with you guys?
I think it's great because it goes back to what we talked about doing research on the market. Like I know, we're being careful because you haven't officially started yet, but you're kind of switching markets a little bit. I mean, this is not you haven't done this for 25 years, right? So this is they've kind of built you a pathway to do research, right? Which I think is really impressive. But I think the takeaway from that is whether the company does it or not, what you just said about being able to walk in the door and feeling more confident, there's ways to do that, right? And the nice thing about this company is they've set you on that path for you. And I know you're doing lots of other research besides what they're asking you to do. But again, that is setting yourself up so that you feel confident, you do feel good. I think it's great that they're putting that activity together, but you can kind of build your own pathway to that too. And I think that's if your company doesn't do that, if you're moving companies or moving industries, you can build your own pathway like that. You don't have to necessarily get certified, but I think you can find opportunities to get yourself more acclimated so that you feel like you're on more level ground, right? Because I think that's what you were saying earlier is that it is intimidating. You're moving into a new space. You are a leader. You're going to be working with people who already have this innate knowledge, and having that to start at least with a foot forward rather than a foot back, I think is really important.
Oh, I thought it was phenomenal.
Yeah.
And then we'll take a page out of your list up there. Set yourself up for success. Think about the goals. One of the things I did about a week after accepting the offer was reach out to my boss, be the CEO, and ask, hey, is there an opportunity to get together here before we start? And we kind of chit chat a little bit about, what this quarter's priorities are. What's your focus area? are the things that I can get off your plate in real time, in the near term, right? What can I help you with? Um, and just kind of chit chat about some of that stuff prior to coming in, right? So I have a good understanding of what company priorities are, goals for the year, maybe some things that we can't talk about in the interview process, right? From a P&L standpoint, revenue standpoint, right?
Sure.
What's really the focus? What are we looking to accomplish here in the next 30, 60, 90 days?
Yeah, I think it's great, and we're going to move here in just a second into the 30, 60, 90 days, right? Which is a lot of people focus on that. I've got the job. Soon as I get started, I'm going to start building that out. But I think what you're pointing out to me really resonates, and I don't think I learned that until I was a little bit older. Was to really prepare yourself, right? You're starting something new. Don't uh, as I always trot out the book, I should start getting a commission for this. What got you here won't get you there, right? Don't just assume because you got the job, you have everything in hand and you're ready to go, right? Get yourself ready. Okay, any other thoughts on pre activities before we jump into the first 30 days?
No, I really love that, Jeremy. That's super cool by that company because it's really solid expectation setting, right? Like you know exactly what they want you to know walking in the door, and then from there, the interview process has tested that you're the right man for the job and to get in there, right? So I love it.
I think it's a great start. All right, so you got the job, you've done all your pre start activities, now you've got your first 30 days. Where do you focus? Again, lots of advice, lots of things you could do, but here are three takeaways I think that fit any job at any point, right? Be a learner. Ask a lot of questions. This is the time to start soaking up that information about your role, the company culture, the team dynamics. Take a lot of notes and don't hesitate to clarify anything that you're not sure about. Ask questions. It's okay, right? They don't expect you to know everything. Yes, they prepared you with your certification. You're still not going to know everything. Ask questions. Be a learner. The second thing is build relationships. Make an effort to connect with all of your colleagues. Introduce yourself. If you're going to an office, have lunch together. If you're not, maybe set up a Zoom happy hour or find out if there is one. Learn about their roles. What does everybody do in the company? We've talked before about understanding the entire ecosystem that we live in, not just the pond that we swim in, right? That's how you get to do that, whether it's a big company or a small one. Building a strong network can really be a valuable resource, and it also makes the work environment more enjoyable. I think the four of us are a key example of that. We've remained friends outside of work, but we had to build that network to get started. And then the third thing is prove your value. Start looking for ways to contribute, right? Even if it's something small like taking the initiative, show your willingness to learn and to help the team. You can also teach. It doesn't mean you just while you're being a learner doesn't mean you can't start teaching. So be a learner, build relationships, prove your value. Jeremy, I'm going to start with you because I know you're already thinking about all these things and how you're going to jump in.
I love the be a learner comment. I can't tell you how much I overuse the I'm new card, right? With colleagues, team members, customers. Hey, can you explain this to me? I'm actually new in the role. Can you talk to me a little bit about how the relationship has been?
Right.
Can you share with me a little bit about how this process works? It's incredible the insights you can get on process improvement, relationships, customer relationships in particular that might need some work, pain points that over time just haven't been addressed by the company or by previous leadership. I think it's phenomenal. I don't know how many times I've used hey, can I sit down and just kind of shadow you for an hour, just kind of see what this looks like, what your day to day looks like, what some of the conversations you're having, the work that you're doing. Um, I will use that far past day 30, right? You probably have to knock me off at like 180 days. You can't say you're new anymore. Um,
It does have an expiration date.
but you also learn about the always learning that you learn about the customer or the company's priorities, right? What are the OKRs, the annual objectives and goals that the company has? How are they measured? What KPIs, what metrics are they using? Trying to learn, what numbers do and as a result, my team directly contribute to or impact from the company's bottom line.
Great point.
where are we today? Where do we need to go tomorrow? Like there's so much you can gain from that. And yeah, I would encourage anybody to overuse the heck out of I'm new, right? And people like to talk about what they do. Like oh my gosh, they could probably still have a conversation with Mark or Chris or Rhett for at least an hour. Hey, what do you do? What is it that you do in your day to day? Like people like to share that stuff, and I think people like to share where there's process issues, right? What was your third bullet point there? Try to play find a place where you can add value. um I had a side thought there. I might also toss in a number 4 item on the list there. Use the first 30 days to set some expectations. You're managing a team. What do you expect? At least at a really high level. um Understand, ask, what does your leadership expect from you? What's the cadence of communication? What's the schedule look like? Et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But I think if you can go in, one of the conversations we always like to have on the team right when new folks came on board is, hey, if I need you within the next day,
Yep.
Does email work best? If I need you in the next hour, does Slack work best? If we're having an emergency, is it a text message? Is it a phone call? Like just setting those expectations up front, right? With how can you get a hold of me if there's a really, really pressing issue? That kind of stuff later on down the road doesn't snowball into some big, huge catastrophe, right? I slacked you 40 times and I didn't hear back. So I think that first 30 days is a great opportunity to set expectations if you're in a leadership role with your team, understand how they work, because that expectation goes both ways, right? What is the team expecting from you as a new leader coming in?
That's right.
And funneling that up. I don't know, Chris, over your time, or Mark, over your time with direct reports, how many folks actually came to you within the first couple of weeks and said, "Hey, man, how do I best work with you?" And I think that can be a really positive message for those of you that maybe this doesn't apply. You're not moving into a new role, but you're on a team. Have you sat down and had a conversation with your manager? Hey, how do I best work with you? What's going to resonate? What's not? What's a pain point? um, uh, Lots of opportunities there.
For sure. Mark, I know you've had thoughts. I'm curious how many people did come to you and ask you that question?
Well, I think a lot of it was addressed in the interview process, because I would ask the question, what is it you expect of me as your manager? So, again, some proactiveness, and again, depending on what the role is, there are varying degrees of how many interviews someone will go through. But I think to Jeremy's point, love being the learner. So, to be a good learner, you have to demonstrate authentic curiosity. Really kind of understand, hey, I know at a surface level based on my research. However, what's the story behind the story? Some companies may actually offer you a mentor. So that's another great way to say, you know what, I'm not going to go to my boss for where do I get more supplies, or if I need this, or how do I fill out this time card, even though it should be part of an onboarding process. But a lot of companies may offer you a mentor to handle some of those day-to-day things. And that's a great way to build that relationship, because most likely they're a peer of yours. I know I had a couple of roles where we did that, and it was great. I think also when you're meeting peer departments or other people from different departments and everything, it's good to maybe consider splitting up the meeting into 2 meetings, because you don't know what you don't know yet. So one of the things, and this was a suggestion as we were improving our onboarding process, years ago, I entrusted everyone with, what, you're the next 2 people up. Our expectation is you're going to improve our process. And that was one of the recommendations. Get to the high level information, say, okay, I'd love to set up another meeting with you, because now in 60 days, I'll hopefully be a little smarter, and I may ask you more relevant questions. I'll have exposure to our customers. I'll have better questions to ask you. So again, it doesn't have to just be that traditional, here's 1 hour, learn everything you need to know about product management and customer support, whatever the departments are. And to Jeremy's last point, I fully agree 1,000%. Understand communication styles. Now, sometimes you may not want to be able to directly ask them, hey, Rhett, how do you communicate? But get that sense, understand how do you want to use different modalities, because certainly if there's a bad phone for issues is that going to come through on text or Slack or whatever the case is?
Brett, anything to add to that?
Yeah, no, I can't count how many times I've heard each one of you say I don't want to hear it second. Uh it was always it was and I know, crazy, right? But I do the same thing, and to the point of the previous bullets we discussed as well, it's I think solid expectation setting is so key with all of this, both up the ladder and down the ladder. And I've always found a lot of power in trying to empower my team with, like what Mark is saying, right? How can I get you to do your best, right? What's gonna be the biggest motivator for you? What's the best way for me to communicate with you? How do I help understand if you're underwater but you're raising the yellow flag in a way that I haven't seen before, right? Where you're like, maybe I can take it on, and to me that means okay, so you can take it on. Whereas we need to communicate, if I'm giving you too much, you need to say I need to shift one of my priorities. So um I think that's really important. Again, both when you're talking to your manager and supervisor, right? Especially if you're in a high up position where you're talking to the CEO or someone who, I mean, you almost always have more goals and plans than you have time, right? So you need to make sure that you're on the same page with them as far as, again, what is that biggest priority? How do I make sure that I'm doing that for you and the company? So, yeah, really like that.
No. All good points. All good points. All right, let's move on to the first 60 days. You've been there 60 days now. Here are three things to think about. Start delivering results, right? By now, you should have a decent grasp on your responsibilities. You should start understanding that culture. You had all of these communication conversations. Start focusing on completing your tasks. Make sure they're efficient and accurate. This will start to build trust with your colleagues and your manager. The second thing is to start to seek feedback. Schedule a midpoint check in with your manager to discuss your progress, get that feedback on your performance. Make sure you are doing what they think you should be doing and you are in line so you don't start to misalign. And we've talked about this in previous episodes. You don't find out at your year end review that you haven't done what they expected you to do. It can start to go off the rails relatively quickly. Um, this is also a two-way street. Make sure that you're providing feedback to your manager about the role. Is it aligned with what your expectations were? Are you working on the things you were supposed to? And make sure you're contributing in the best way possible. And the third thing is to start exploring opportunities. If you have the bandwidth, as Rhett said earlier, you don't want to just take things on. You don't want to just always show your tails wagging. You want to make sure there's room in the day. But if you're at a point where you can start taking on more projects, explore some opportunities. Start looking at ways you can expand your skill set. Look at training opportunities. There may be some other things that you could work on outside of your normal role that might help you expand your understanding and expand your interaction. It'll help you show some ambition and some interest in learning more. And I think, as a manager, that was always interesting to me. Like if you're coming to me and saying, is there more I can do? I appreciate that as a manager, but guys, I'll turn that over to you. Maybe, Rhett, I'll start with you this time.
Sure. Yeah, so by this point, you should definitely have an idea of how success is measured, right? You'll start getting some feedback from those around you, your supervisor and your teammates as far as do things feel like they're gelling, right? To begin with, if there's any friction still left, I would really probably start to uh, dive into that, right? And try to get rid of that, because at this point, it's more likely that it could get worse or cause more friction going down the line if you don't try to get ahead of the ball, right? So you can remove that possible obstacle. So know how and what success is, and see kind of where you're at as far as achieving that along with your goals, right? One other potential tip I had here is if you're struggling with getting to know your team, or if your team is succeeding, right? Hey, I'm really struggling to get feedback from my team right now. Like, yes, we're hitting our goals, but I still just feel like we work across the country and I don't know who likes A, B, or C, or how I can improve or do better. Am I succeeding in what? What I've done in the past is potentially utilize anonymous surveys, right? And how you can get feedback from that. But with those, make sure you're asking questions that when you get an answer, you have a next step, right? The question, am I doing a good job? While may tell you that, hey, X% of employees like you, X% don't, whether they answer yes or no to that doesn't necessarily give you a next step on, okay, well, I need to improve on my open communication, or I need to improve on setting more clear goals for the team because they don't understand which direction we're going, right? So that's one of the other things. And yeah, to that final point, if have you explored it all, or have you started to explore? This is probably later on, but any types of certifications or additional education that could really help your team if you guys are lacking that, you're finding that early on. But I would say you're most likely going to discover that in 60, 90 days. But yeah.
Great point. Mark, Jeremy, who wants to jump in on that one?
So what I was going to say is, after 60 days, it's time for self-assessment and reflection. Are you meeting your goals, as Rhett said? If there are gaps, what's my mitigation strategy? How do I close those? Certainly getting all the feedback that you can from that. And the last point I would make is, after 60 days, revisit the communication styles. Are you in alignment with the communication styles that you thought people were going to have, and even yourself, right? So I think, again, it's just that time for reflection, getting that feedback, and then being able to still plow through day 61 and on to infinity.
Great point. Yeah, because things can change, or you could have made a first day assumption about what the communication channels were, and they may not be what you thought. So I think that's really smart. Jeremy, any thoughts on that one?
Yeah, no, I love the feedback item. I might add to that, if you're moving into a leadership role, remember, you might be the new person, but for your team, it's a new leadership style. It's a new person evaluating their performance. It's all new for them too, right? It's not just new for the person that's stepping into that role. And I think it's important as you're starting out, for the people on your team to hear how they're doing from your perspective, right? They might have been a rock star for the past, whoever they were reporting to in the past. Are they still that way, right? Can you help ease that transition period, by I think certainly soliciting feedback on yourself. How's our performance? How are we getting traction? Are we moving in the right direction? But providing that back out too, if you've got teams reporting to you. It can also be a great opportunity to help continue building that relationship with folks that report to you. Do you know where everybody on your team wants to be in a year, 3 years from now? Does the company have career ladders in place? No? Build them. There's an opportunity for you in the first 30, 60 days, right? Hey, they don't have them. Hey, let's do this with the team. Are you seeing folks that are, in your opinion, as a new person, that are struggling in their role? Start having those conversations today. There's no better time, right? I'm new. Hey, I'm new. Help me understand. And if you're seeing great, phenomenal, outstanding behavior, recognize it, reward it, set the tone early on how that stuff goes. Um, I think you get into that 60-day mark, and that's where your learning really starts to pay off, right? Hopefully, who does what, who's responsible for what, who owns what. You're starting to put together some of those tactical project plans, things that you can impact in that first 30, 60, 90-day window based on what you picked up on the first month. You've got the opportunity there to set the stage again in terms of expectation. Are you holding folks accountable for timelines and deliveries? And, as you get into that kind of tactical day to day, objective management. But I think it's also an opportunity for you to, continue to be learning, continue to be listening, continue to be part of those strategic conversations that are happening. I think getting a better view overall of what that big picture, that 100,000-foot strategy, and overarching goal of what you're doing, what your teams are doing, is still invaluable at this point, right? I'd still be listening more than I'm contributing in that 30 to 60 day window.
I'm surprised that Mark, our resident quote person, did not throw out the Jerry Maguire quote, "Help me help you." Right? I was waiting for it. I didn't hear it. A little disappointed. A little disappointed. All right, let's move on to our last section, which is the first 90 days. All right, now you've been there, you've gotten acclimated, you've done all of the things that we've talked about. Now's your opportunity to start to become an expert, right? And by expert, we don't mean you know everything, but you can start to become a go-to person in that area where you are supposed to have an expertise. Make sure you're sharing your knowledge with your colleagues and offer help where needed. And this will begin to start solidifying your value within that team. The second thing to do is to evaluate and adjust. Take some time to reflect on your goals and how well you're progressing on them. Have you hit them? Are you on track to? Do you need to make adjustments? Discuss your long term goals with your manager and see if there's alignment. We were talking about this earlier. There's always time to reflect and adjust. And then the last thing is to network and collaborate. Look for opportunities to collaborate with colleagues from other departments. This will help you gain a broader perspective of the company. Now that you know your position better, you can really start to absorb. Even if you've done that in that first 30, 60 days, now that you're not maybe drinking from the fire hose quite so much, you'll start to better understand those interconnective tissues and do more with it and start to build those stronger relationships across the organization. Who wants to jump in on that one?
Mark?
Don't be afraid.
All right, I'll go.
It is a podcast where we talk, gentlemen.
Yeah, here's the audience participation part of the
There we
program.
go, whenever you're ready.
So, no, I think, again, on one hand, you said it, Chris, being an expert in 90 days is a bit of a stretch. However, the point is taken that you can demonstrate leadership by being a resource for others, as well as being vulnerable enough to ask for assistance, from those other new colleagues that you have. And that really will help build that trust with them. The second thing is life's a series of evaluation and adjustments. So again, there's always going to be an occasional random event that occurs that, literally, hey, I didn't think of this. Did anyone else think of this? How are we going to address it and try and put quickly a plan together? That's going to show your adaptability and your agility as a part of the organization. And finally, try and understand who your trusted advisors or your allies are going to be. Not everyone, spoiler alert, but not everyone may be on your side. So therefore, it's better to know, okay, who can I trust when I really need that strong feedback, and who are the folks that I may have to adjust my interactions with just to make sure that I'm being, I wouldn't say guarded, but cautious and very thoughtful about what you say, how you say it, so it's not misinterpreted.
Jeremy, Red, any thoughts on that? Or
Yeah. I like this one, the 90 days. That's when the fun's kicking in, right? And for those of you that have been following the podcast, the last time I tried to quote somebody, I actually screwed up the two people that I was quoting. So I'm going to read this one. Chris's "What got you here won't get you there" has been resonating with me, and I'm going to credit this one with Parker Eanes. He's the CEO and co-founder of Jump. Posted up there on LinkedIn. One of his cousins, Britton Johnson, was a former pro ball player, and was doing a TEDx talk in Utah on easy and hard. Right, and he says, when things get hard, focus on the easy things that you can control. Maybe this is partly back to Rhett's control the controllable.
Hey.
But I think for a lot of folks, you get to that 90-day mark, and you can start feeling some weight with a new position, a new role, right? You've got a full understanding of all the stuff that needs to get done. Maybe the rose-colored glasses are off on the new role. And I really like Britton's take on this. He said, it's easy to show up for practice. He says, it's hard to show up to practice 30 minutes early so I can make sure I get a spot on the equipment, right? It's easy to have fast food. It's hard to stick with a nutritionist and a training schedule. And what he would do is he'd make a list of those different things and the things that he could impact, the little things that he could impact every single day. Maybe like making your bed, right? You've accomplished something the first thing you get up in the morning. And I really like that. So I wanted to shout that out. If you haven't seen that, TEDx, Britton Johnson out of Utah is a great little 15-minute TEDx talk. Um,
Right.
so I back to the bullet points. I agree with Chris and Mark completely, right? I think trying to setting an expectation for yourself that you're the expert within 3 months, I think is gonna come back and backfire on you. Potentially, if you're jumping in and you're trying to be prescriptive about things already at that point. I don't know, me personally, 90 days in, I'm still kind of listening. I might be the CX or the CS expert in the room, but I'm not the business expert. I mean, I would still fully anticipate that my team members know more about what they're doing day to day at 90 days. The product marketing, those folks they're gonna know their jobs inside and out, right? I'm still listening and learning at that point. Um, the I will say that I love the evaluate and adjust bullet point under the 90 days.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah.
be open to change, right? You've got changing priorities, changing dynamics, changing business results, right? Who knows what the next quarter is going to look like? Simply by you being there, some of these things have changed in the last 90 days, right? Maybe it's a new position, a new role, a new team. Yeah, I think it's really worth having a retro, not the first 30, 60 go, um, and potentially recalibrate, excuse me. Can be an amazing opportunity to get a handle on, correct some issues that have been persisting in the business. Um, again, you're new. You're not in a position of being at fault for things
Mhm.
that you find that may be able to be corrected or updated or adjusted in a company, but you can leverage that newness in a position with transparency in a really positive way, right? Like, hey, I found this. I want to understand it better. Is there a reason we're doing it this way, or is there a reason we're doing it that way? I just think it's a golden opportunity. Um, Last, I think I'd add it at 90 days, you really should have a good handle on the value you're bringing or should be bringing to the business, the value you bring in, the value of your team. What's the impact? I'd say sit down with your leadership and be transparent. If you're an individual contributor role, maybe the conversation is like, here's where my accounts are. Here's the priority that I'm focusing on. Does that sound right? Does that line up against the OKRs? Maybe from a leadership perspective, conversation looks like, hey, these are the initiatives I'm pushing right now. These are the projects. These are the account or customer goals that we're shooting for. Are we shooting in the right direction? Worst case scenario, you get some validation. Best case scenario, somebody pushes back and says, really glad you shared that because I'd actually like to swap this one and this one and this one, right? And you're not making any assumptions. Don't make assumptions, right? So I like that one. I think that was a really good ad that sit down, get some feedback, be open to change, be open to evaluating your position. Um, and 90 days, you're a rock star. You made it through that probably probationary period. You're feeling the weight of the world, but hopefully knocking it out of the park.
Yeah,
Right. Those are
now
great.
go ahead,
Go ahead,
Chris.
Brett. No, I was just going to turn it over to you. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, I guess I'm going to echo everyone else. You're probably not the expert at this point, but to give everyone a little bit, for something in 90 days, take a look back at maybe what you have been able to accomplish and try to put that on maybe a more zoomed in scale, right? What are the comments or the ideas or the areas where you are getting feedback from your team members or other teams on like, oh, Rhett, that's a really interesting idea. We hadn't thought about it that way, right? Okay. And like Jeremy and Mark have said, bring that up and say, hey, this was something that was brought up day 35. It kind of got lost in the weeds as I continued to drink from the fire hose, but this is potentially something that I think I could really bring to the team and could continue to grow upon. What do you think? Don't necessarily skip the step of trying to look back at what you maybe have been able to accomplish or at least brought up in those first 90 days. Think you might be able to find something. One other point that I just love, it was briefly mentioned, but the cross team collaborations and interactions, right? As has been stated in previous bullets here, you're going to have people in teams that you tend to either get along with really well right off the bat, and that could be because of you or just how the team has grown or the value add you bring to that team. And there may be other relationships where there's a bit of friction, right? Maybe sales doesn't necessarily love the role that your team has been in the past because it always feels constricting to them or something, right? You're the cost enforcer. You're the one who has to limit the marketing budget. But look at those and try to figure out who to kind of talk to and continue to push collaborations together, right? Because it's a lot easier to take that person who's been there for 5 years and kind of get on an idea with them and combine it to be able to push something forward if you're struggling there. But also look at who you're maybe struggling with. Who is the team that you have the most friction with, right? And maybe think about sitting down with that person and saying, "Hey, it's been 90 days. I've learned a lot. I want to continue to learn about what we are struggling with as fellow teams and figure out how we can make it better going forward." So, not that you can master those conversations and relationships, but I think you can start pursuing them a little bit more seriously as you're looking at your goals for the year.
I like that call out. The new people. That's the most. I'll start this off. Maybe we can go round robin real quick. My favorite thing about starting with a new company, a new business, is getting to know the people, right? Those are the
Mhm.
people you get to, and that was one of my look fors in the job search, right? I want to go to work with a group of people that I can grab my cup of coffee in the morning and be super excited to work with, right? You spend 8, 9, 10 hours a day with these folks. So for me, I get really jazzed. Like as nervous as I am at meeting the team and meeting my colleagues, I'm so pumped to get to know a whole new group of people, right? Group of people that hopefully is efforting together and they're all working towards this common goal. And I pray to God the culture is good and the energy level is good. And do you guys have a favorite like a look for? You guys have started dozens of new jobs throughout your career, I'm sure, right? What's
Wow,
something that really
dozens.
gets you jazzed?
Okay, I mean,
Dozens is a strong term.
all successful.
That's
Mark, Chris, what do you guys think? I'll let you guys go.
Go ahead, Mark.
I agree with Jeremy. It's the people. It's just getting to understand, and learn from others. And hopefully, it's just like mentoring, right? I'm here to learn as much from you as hopefully you may learn from me. So I think to me, that was always the most exciting part of, apprehension to enthusiasm all within like the first 6 hours. But again, it really comes down to the people and the networking and the relationships.
Yeah, I think for me, it's the learning piece. I love getting to know the people. That kind of comes just because of who I am. But I love the opportunity to learn new things or apply my skills in different ways. I think that's where it's always exciting is getting to learn something new. I want to be that lifelong learner. I don't want to feel like I've got it all figured out, right? So to me, getting in there, drinking from that fire hose a little bit and learning all those tidbits and it feels uncomfortable until it isn't. And that's one little piece of advice I would say is you feel like the new person until one day you just don't. And it's not like you walk through a door. It's just all of a sudden you stop feeling like the new person and you're part of the group, right? That could happen at 30 days. It could happen at 6 months. But just know that over time you just become part of it. And by communicating, by interacting with people, by learning, by being vulnerable, like we've talked about, you'll become a part of that group, and before you know it, you are part of that culture. Red, any last things to add to that?
Yeah, I'd probably say I look for learners, adapters, and positivity. Because I tend to find that as again, I always like to try and utilize the resources and the momentum that is around me than necessarily always having to fully generate it myself. If there's someone who I really get along with, they're a learner, they're a positive person, they come in, they're willing to sit down for an hour or two, talk to me about their team, and they've been there for 5 years. They have relationships with these other people. Maybe they started the company with the CEO, right? That, I have a natural affinity of working with them and our passions get along. I love that. And for the other aspects of it, for people that are on your team, I just find that things like positivity are tough to necessarily create in someone. So obviously you don't got to be, joyful Todd or whatever every meeting you're coming on and you're as excited as Jeremy or I maybe are, but a general sense of like, okay, this is a new idea. I want to go along with it, and see what we can come up with. So those are my things that I tend to look for if I'm looking to keep that momentum going, right?
I think your new superhero name is going to be Joyful Todd, by the way. So file that away for next time.
He's still single. No, I'm kidding.
All right, so let's summarize. Let's wrap this up. We're going to do a quick summary. So, top 3 things to do before you start is to research and familiarize yourself, get your logistics and preparation ready, and start to set yourself up for success. During the first 30 days, be a learner, build relationships, and prove your value. The first 60 days, deliver results, seek feedback, and explore opportunities. And in that first 90 days, start to become an expert, evaluate and adjust, and network and collaborate. And one last thing I might do a plug again. I got to start getting paid for these book reviews and plugs. But there's a great book that one of our colleagues at Amplify actually hipped me to, and I hadn't heard of it, but it was so helpful whether you're in the first 90 days or not. But it was really helpful whether it's a new company or a new role. There's a book called The First 90 Days, Proven Strategies for Getting Up to Speed Faster and Smarter. It's by Michael D. Watkins. It's on Amazon. You can get it on your Kindle. It's a really nice book that helps you kind of coalesce your thoughts into these categories. So also, that's part of that learning is don't hesitate or don't be afraid to grab something that can help guide you through. All right. And with that, that is the end of the podcast. As always, thank you for joining us on this episode of the Generational Exchange. We hope the conversation between our generations have sparked some new ideas and helped you see the business world from fresh perspectives. Don't forget to subscribe for more insightful discussions across the generations. And by the way, when you subscribe, you get the episode automatically every week, so make sure to hit that subscribe button. And if you have a burning question you'd like us to tackle or a topic you'd like us to follow up on, leave a comment or shoot us an email at cmsrconsulting@gmail.com. Until next week, from all of us at the Generational Exchange, thanks for listening and happy learning.